forgot to hit record. Thank you.
Okay, so next slide.
Yep. Give it a second. There it goes. Sorry, there was a delay.
June, the other thing that we do is we provide progress reports to the state, and we also send these out to the counties. You can see on the numbers here, this is our July report that we provided in August. We measure what we call milestones. There's 8 milestones here of all the different elements of this infrastructure project. And again, the bottom line is the most important one, 13.709, 13,700 passings so far, about 38% done on the passings on this project.
Okay, hitting that before if you'll go ahead and hit OK on yours.
All right. So I'm going to move along the fun part of the project for those of us that work in it is going out in the all through the companies to see the work that's being done. So we took a few pictures. So the next few slides are some of the pictures we took of our project. So in March, we were in Madison County on the left. That's a site planning that they were doing for a communication hut. And on the right is some completed mainline fiber that we observed. Keep on going. And then April 23rd, we went back to that area. On the left, you can see the trees have leaves on it in just 1 month, and the communication hut is set. Gravel driveway's in. And then you can see this is a steel fiber connection on the steel poles. That was a little bit different than the other poles, so we take time to look at that as well. And then in May, we were down in Campbell County in the Concord area to see some completed fiber and some connections that were made to homes in that area. And then in June, we were in Appomattox County, seeing a pedestal installation on some connections to the Dominion Middle Mile. One thing that we observed was, you can't see this on the slide, but you can tell we're stepped way back from the folks working there. They hit a underground hornet's nest as they're putting the pedestal there. And it just kind of reminds us of what happens out in the field and things that change their scope, and they have to come back and after they had taken care of the hornets and finished their project. So that was something we observed that day from a distance. And then in Greene County, Stannersville area, we saw some completed fiber installations on the REC poles. You can see multiple pictures of the work that we saw being constructed in Greene County. And then the final one that we went out in August to see was a communication hut being installed by a large crane. And again, another safety issue. Those cranes have to be extremely careful. They're working around those, as you can see, those electrical lines. Very dangerous work. Another piece of the multiple types of work that are done in this major infrastructure project. And then finally, before I end, I just wanted to mention to everyone, and I'm sure you've seen the press release, we received another grant. It's called the Body 24 grant. It's another round of funding that came in. There was a number of 25 applications for about $170 million in funds. We were very happy to receive $12.2 million in state funds. And this is going to expand our project a little bit more. It's going to be able to reach more houses that are eligible, more businesses that are eligible in 10 of our 13 counties. So it's going to be a $48.6 million expansion, 5,825 additional locations. And then again, it'll continue all the partnerships that we have with Rappahannock Electric, Cooperative Dominion, and the county governments. And then finally, just as I end, Firefly has a really nice website. You can see all the progress that's underway. You can go into their partnership area and see where the progress is going on in the counties, in the TJPDC area, as well as the other counties. And they keep it updated like every week or so, so you can see exactly what areas are receiving fiber. So thank you very much for your attention, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Well, thank you. Well, Mr. Louisa, all right. Next, we will have Isabella O'Brien. We have the updates on the watershed improvement program.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I'm Isabella O'Brien of Planner 2 with the PDC, and today I'll be discussing the Chesapeake Bay PDC Locality Implementation Program, or WIP. I'm the program manager, and this is an annual environmental program designed to help our local governments and the state meet the Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL. And the TMDL sets limits on the amount of pollution that can enter local streams and eventually the Chesapeake Bay, ensuring it meets water quality standards for activities like fishing, drinking water, and recreation. For a little bit of background, the Chesapeake Bay, you can see here, is North America's largest and most biologically diverse estuary. For hundreds of years, the bay and its tributaries have sustained the region's economy and defined its culture. However, by the 1970s, the bay's health was declining due to excessive pollution from sources like agriculture and development. In 1973, a study revealed that nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment runoff were harming the aquatic life and fisheries. And as the bay developed, pollution increased due to factors such as runoff from farms, sewage discharge from septic systems, and urban and suburban runoff. The loss of trees and wetlands, which act as natural filters for pollution, exacerbated the problem. In response, the US EPA established the Chesapeake Bay program to restore the bay and signed the first Chesapeake Bay Agreement in 1983. And after decades of effort, the bay continues to struggle with water quality issues, and so far all of the agreements have failed. So to address this, in 2010, the TMDL that I mentioned before was developed as a federal strategy to accelerate restoration and hold all jurisdictions accountable to the pollution reduction goals. Watershed implementation plans were created for each state to outline the specific actions for achieving the TMDL by the 2025 deadline, so December 2025. And these WIPs represent a culmination of legal requirements, federal commitment, and the need for a coordinated approach for pollution reduction. The efforts of PDCs across Virginia is just a small portion of what's included in the Virginia WIP, and it's why I'm here today to update you. Moving on to 2024 scope of work. So in 2024, we continued our efforts under the WIP program, maintaining the 80-20 funding split between DEQ and our local governments. Since 2018, TJPDC staff has served as a bridge between DEQ and localities, providing public education on water quality and best management practices and expanding local capacity for water conservation. However, a shift in approach was prompted by DEQ and the Chesapeake Bay program in 2023, recognizing that Virginia and the Bay are falling short of the 2025 TMDL goals. So PDCs across the state are transitioning towards supporting on-the-ground best management practice implementation instead of education and support. So these efforts can include tree plantings, permeable pavement installation, green roofs, and stream bank stabilization, just to name a few. Examples of this shift in this year's scope include collaborating with our housing team to report the septic system pump outs and maintenance projects to DEQ, aiding in pollution reduction modeling, and then conducting rain barrel workshops in new localities like Nelson County to showcase at-home water conservation practices and provide homeowners with everything they need to install it at home. Moving on to a little bit more about why this landscape is changing. So the Chesapeake Bay program's warning highlighted the need for more on-the-ground action to address stormwater runoff. And despite progress in reducing nitrogen and phosphorus loads, these pollution sources still remain significant challenges. So this missed deadline and the availability of new funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has prompted PDCs to adopt a more focused approach. We're now prioritizing the implementation to maximize progress before the 2025 deadline and continue our efforts through 2027 thanks to the IIJA funding dedicated to PDCs. A few updates from DEQ. So in response to this funding availability, EPA has increased the amount of funding available to planning district commissions within WIP. And the first round became available to PDCs 2 years ago in 2023. And we've been working with local partners, your staff, and DEQ to develop grant proposals to help our region increase the MP implementation. Next slide. And this is just an example of how other PDCs have utilized the funds just in the last year. And you can see 8 PDCs received the funding out of 2020, out of 21 Virginia PDCs. And they range from tree planting projects, permeable pavement installation on public land to septic pump out programs and installation projects. Next slide, please. So for 2025, we will continue our baseline activities with the $72,500 from DEQ with local match to continue sharing grant information about the stewardship mapping and assessment project, supporting grant applications for water conservation and growing our local partnerships. We will also be applying for an additional $150,000 with no match required to implement 3 new projects. The first of which will be the TJPDC's pilot septic pump out program, mirroring what many other PDCs have done across the state, providing 50 low-income homeowners in the rural section of the watershed with free septic pump outs, working with local partners to process homeowner applications, work with homeowners and the septic contractors. We will also be supporting Friends of the Rappahannock with the Greene County South River Stream Bank Restoration Project, which will fund phase 1 of design, engineering, and permitting for the partnership. And this project is just 5 miles downstream from the county's drinking water intake. So it will provide significant sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus reductions in that area. And then continuing on the momentum from this year, with our rain barrel workshop program, providing residents with everything they need to install a do-it-yourself rainwater harvesting barrel to support water quality and conservation. We're supporting efforts and have the past 2 years in Charlottesville and Albemarle, but we are also this year and next year hosting workshops in partnership with the Soil and Water Conservation District in Nelson, Fluvanna, Louisa, and Greene counties. So, well, actually, okay. Okay.
You want me to go back again?
So approximately 20% of this funding, or $30,000, will go to the TJPDC for program management, administration, and the reporting of these best management practices to DEQ. And in the Charlottesville area, a single rain barrel can collect over 21,000 gallons of stormwater. In Nelson County alone, for a workshop with 15 rain barrels that will collectively capture over 3,000 gallons of stormwater a year. Just 1 rain barrel can reduce an average home stormwater runoff potential by about 29%. We're excited to expand this program, the septic pump out program, and support stream bank stabilization in Greene. We look forward to working with you and with staff to identify additional EMP opportunities.
So my family used to have a pig farm back in the late 80s it was. And when the Chesapeake Bay thing came about, they were a little bit more ruthless back in those days and they gave no transitionary period. We ran a 5,000 pig farm on like 3 blue line creeks. And as you imagine where effluent discharges, it goes to the creek. So you learn about E. coli and all that and what that does with nitrogen and all this stuff. Back in those days, they just shut your business down and say tough luck. Nowadays, luckily, they have a little bit more government assistance in trying to resolve.
Yeah, the soil and water conservation districts have been really instrumental with agricultural homeowners, stream bank exclusion, and the riparian forest buffers.
Yeah, so that's it. It's amazing how that has evolved.
Yeah.
I'd probably be a pig farmer today.
Yeah,
I think.
the Chesapeake Bay agreement, like with EPA, they have the capacity to provide further enforcement if the bay doesn't meet those requirements. So in urban Charlottesville and Albemarle, there's an MS4, they're required to meet certain pollution reduction goals. And right now the rural areas aren't held to that, which is why, we're doing as much as we can before the 2025 deadline to meet as many goals as possible.
Anything else? We just need more oysters.
Yeah.
The oyster beds are recovering pretty nicely. I think it's an interesting story on that side.
Yeah.
I used to live on Chuckatuck Creek. And there was a story how originally the Chuckatuck Creek prior to the 1970s and the whole ketone pollution was home to the largest group of black oystermen in this country. Lots of land had been set aside and kept in families for generations. Then when the ketone happened, that all stopped, and so consequently, now that they have cleaned up a fair amount, and that's not as much of a concern. Some of these beds are restored, and the farmers are returning to the beds. Pretty easy, so people oysters. Yeah, I need these oysters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda?
I don't think I was at the June meeting, was I? I'm pretty sure I was. I'll make one.
I'll make the motion. Just you're aware, we go through the consent agenda. And we have a second. Second. All right, motion to name by Mr. John Ronquillo, seconded by. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All against? All abstain? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Now we will move on to new business. May, June, July financial reports. Margaret.
Hello, I'm going to remain seated if that's okay. I'll do it from here. So good evening. The last presentation of the financial reports occurred at the June 6th commission meeting, which covered the period through April 30th. Tonight's packet includes the last 2 months of fiscal year 24 and the first month of fiscal year 25. Because of that, this presentation will not be a quarterly summary, even though it covers 3 months. So let's begin with the fiscal year 24 financial dashboard through June of 2024. The net quick assets are a highly liquid asset held by the agency. The target is 5 months operating expenses based on a rolling 12-month average. As of June 30th, the TJPDC had 11.38 months of operating expense, and the rolling 12-month average decreased to 133,924. Actual operating expenses in May were 145,000, and in June were 143,445. Net quick assets above the target are earmarked as capital reserves. As of June 30, capital reserves were at 854,321. Unrestricted cash on hand are funds available immediately to TJPDC for expenses and does not include pass-through deposits in transit. Total cash minus deferred revenue equals unrestricted cash on hand. The months of unrestricted cash divide unrestricted cash on hand by the average monthly operating expenses to give the number of months of operation without additional cash received. June's financials indicated there were 1.69 months of unrestricted cash on hand available. Oops. The June alarm is anything less than $267,847, which is the average operating expenses for 2 months. The actual unrestricted cash on hand was $226,788. The net revenue is the surplus or shortfall resulting from monthly revenues minus expenses. To prevent skewing of the data, the body telecommunications program has been removed from the first draft and it's reported separately. The agency's net gain in May was 49,807 and in June was 21,748. The fiscal year ended with a total net gain of 460,222, which can be seen on the consolidated profit and loss for June of 2024. As a reminder, this net gain is a one-time gain and is not budgeted for fiscal year 25 operating expenses. The funds do, however, increase the amount in the capital reserve account. Moving on to the financial dashboard through July. Please note that this report indicates July of 2025,
However, it is through July of 2024. On July 31st, the agency had $1,538,193 in net quick assets, which covers 11.45 months of operating expenses. The rolling 12-month average increased to $134,329. The actual operating expenses in July were $145,047, and the capital reserve balance was $854,321. For unrestricted cash on hand, July's data indicated there were 1.4 months of unrestricted cash on hand available based on a calculated unrestricted cash on hand balance of $187,830 and a July target of $268,659. It is important to note that these targets are impacted by the existing capital reserve policy, the net quick asset policy, and the unrestricted cash on hand policy. In fiscal year 2024, the unrestricted cash on hand dipped below the 2-month average target more than 50% of the time. Therefore, staff would like to recommend that these policies be reviewed by the Finance and Executive Committee against current agency goals, as they were set at a time when the agency expenses were much lower. This review may lead to a recommendation to modify these policies at a future commission meeting. Additionally, while the capital reserve account is labeled by policy as a restricted account, the funds are liquid and are technically available to cover operating expenses should the need arise. The agency's net gain in July was $11,876. The July accrued revenue report projects the total average available funds of $184,229 for the remaining 11 months of fiscal year 25, which is ample to cover projected expenses. Any questions?
Looks good. Do we invest in any of those reserves of the quick assets? We don't do it, it's just.
They're in VIP,
Yeah.
the Virginia Investment Pool, yes. Yeah, we leave some cash because we need to be able to, we do a lot of expenses that we pay up front and then seek reimbursement. But about 800 and some thousand is in VIP,
No, we're at 1.2.
1.2 of the 1.5 is in VIP.
Yes.
Okay.
So we try to keep about 100 and 200,000 in the operating accounts.
Yeah.
So we don't have to keep going in and out of the VIP account regular.
Interest rates as high as they are, that's a little plus there.
It is.
We'll see that in the budget.
Okay, then we'll move on to the draft FY. Thank you very much, by the way. We're gonna move on to the draft FY. Projected operating budget.
Action item.
That is actually an action item. If we can, staff would recommend a motion to accept the financial reports as presented.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the May, June, and July financial reports.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Rutherford, seconded by Mr. Durancio. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? The chair votes aye, motion passes. Unanimously. All right, next, then the draft of 2026 projected operating budget.
Okay, it's coming to you in draft form and there is no action required tonight. It will also go before the Finance Executive Committee in their September 7th meeting. And then back to you all in October for consideration for approval. Each fall, PDC prepares the projected budget that's setting the FY26 local per capita rate and the local contributions. That is the purpose, so we can then go out and apply to the local governments for those funds in their budget cycles. The budget that's presented before you is balanced. It only includes known or highly likely revenue sources, which means it is very likely that it will change before it comes to you again in the spring for final adoption for the fiscal year, as we secure additional funding and we have more contracts in place that confirm suspected sources that are not yet known. And then there is a one-time reserve transfer to balance the budget in the amount of $34,922. That is not uncommon. We have almost always had a reserve transfer in the initial projected budget. And then by the time the actual budget comes before you in the spring, we've already closed that gap and we don't need to utilize that. If the past is any indication, we have not dipped into reserves in the past 5 years since I've been here. The per capita rate is set at 68 cents. That was approved by the commission in September of 2022 at a 2 cents per year escalation rate. The budget assumes a 5% increase in staff salary as a placeholder for budgeting purposes. Before we get into the spring, we're going to be doing quite a bit of analysis on comps and class, like many of your jurisdictions have done. So that number may change when the final budget comes before you. It is a 44,650,426 in both revenues and expenses. And then in the September 17th Finance and Executive Committee meeting, we are going to have a discussion about the local contributions, which I'll move to on the next page, and talk a little bit more about. Between now and October, I'd ask for your review of this, asking of questions, giving comments, so that the one we put before you in October has any revisions incorporated, so that it's a smooth transition. So this first page is the totals. You'll see on the right-hand column, all of the projected revenues by source. You'll see the operating expenses split by our personnel costs and our direct costs. You can see that 1.5 million of our 2 million in operating expenses is personnel. And then you can see the amount of pass-through that comes in and goes out to other agencies, for home, HPG, SIG tax, taxes that we give to the local jurisdictions, and then the VADI broadband pass-through. Then move down to the next page. In your packets, you will see all of the revenues broken out by source and by program. The highlighted ones are ones that are anticipated and likely to be funded, but we have not yet secured contracts for those. We do include those because they are generally annual programs that we continue to receive funding for, so they're included in that budget. You'll see that the interest budgeted last year was 34,000. This year it's up to 50,000, to your point, Mr. O'Brien. We continue to receive rent revenue from a couple of office spaces back here that we sublease out to other tenants. And then the last one, I'm going to zoom in really big, if you'll forgive me for a second while I try to right size it to the screen. This is the per capita, and this is the one that I wanted to go through in a little bit more detail. And then of course, take any questions on any of it. So the way that our per capita and local contributions are determined is we do our population estimates using Walden Cooper Center's estimates that are publicized. The per capita rate was set by the commission in 2022. That's that 68 cents. That's the green column. You'll then see the series of yellow columns. Those are local contributions that we receive for specific programs. And those funds are dedicated to those programs and not used for other sources. One of the conversations that I would like to have with the Finance Executive Committee is many of these programs, we have not changed the funding request in many, many, many years. So for example, if you were to look at solid waste, the 10,500 we received is the same amount we've been requesting since 2008. And so as you guys can imagine, with escalating costs that we've had over time, we're using the same amount of money to try to do the same amount of work with way less time for staff to do it. So we want to talk about how can we set this up similar to the per capita to grow slowly over time, so we don't have to have large adjustments as we go through the budgeting process. So we'll talk about that first with Finance Executive, and if any recommendations or revisions are made to the budget, I'll highlight those in a memo coming back to you in October. And then finally, you look at the end, the blue column is the total of the per capita plus all of the local program source funds. If you then take that green per capita, we have to pull funding out of that for required local matches on our programs. So for example, the rural transportation program, we pull from the 5 rural portions out of the per capita. Same with mobility management, the MPO, and the watershed improvement program. Those are matches that we are required to do, but we have not gone to the local governments to ask for additional funding. We just use the per capita that we already received to meet those match requirements. And then once you get to the end, we have a balance of what's left. If we take all of the funding we receive from our local governments, it boils down to 100,000 by commission policy. 75% of that has to be used for regional activities, which means 2 or more jurisdictions. The remaining balance, 25%, can be for hyper local technical support. So you'll see those balances in the pinkish gray columns on the right. Okay. Then once you guys consider it, ask questions, Finance Executive Committee has a stab at any revisions or questions that they may have. It comes back to you all. Again, this is just the projected. It only sets those local applications. It'll then come back to you in April and May. with any final revisions, any known sources updated, and that will be the budget that is approved that we use throughout the fiscal year to manage by. I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have on this budget.
You have any questions? I know it's a lot of work. For part of the staff. All right, moving on then, we'll now go to the Department of Housing and Community Development Planning District Boundary Review.
All right, so the Regional Cooperation Act outlines the duties and the responsibilities of PDCs. It tells us what we are charged with doing. DHCD, the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, is required by code 36-139.7 to complete a review of the planning district boundaries following all of the decennial censuses. So we are at the point where they do a standard review of all of the boundaries. It goes out for public comments. I just wanted to share with you all that we are in that public notice phase for public comments. Included in your packet was where that public comments portal is, as well as the existing PDC boundary map. So this is more of an informational item to let you guys know that that is occurring, should you have any comments.
Yeah. All right, well, no business, let's bring up.
Great.
Then we'll move on to the executive director report.
Okay. Just highlight a couple of items. I already told you the Finance Executive Committee is meeting September 17th. We are going to look not only at the budget, but we're going to do the pre-audit portion. Within that meeting, we are also going to look at some recommended employee handbook policy revisions based on changes in code, just updating to make sure that we're meeting code and pulling things out of our handbook to streamline and make it a little bit clearer and easier to follow. We'll then be coming back to you all in the spring with additional suggested revisions to the handbook, but those would have fiscal impacts. So we'll be working with the Finance Executive Committee during the year to start to think about some decisions that may need to happen that would be in the handbook, but then would have an impact on the budget. And that's looking at our compensation that we offer. That's looking at, oh my goodness, there's a whole slew of items that we're going to get into with the handbook. Our leave policies right now, we do both sick leave and personal leave, and looking at an analysis of whether we should move to PTO. So all of those types of decisions could have a financial component. So we're going to do that analysis before the spring presentation of the budget. And then we will also, in that Finance Executive Committee meeting, put forward a revised procurement policy. And we're trying, basically, the financial policy and procurement policy that we have in place right now at the PDC is much more restrictive than the states. We have morphed a little bit as an agency. We are working in much bigger numbers. We are operating, with these large grants. And so we would like to right-size our procurement policy to match what the state is doing so that we have a lot less procurement requirements than we currently do. Right now, we have to procure any purchases over 10,000, and at the state, it's 100,000. So we want to work with you all to say, what is the number that you're comfortable with, where we can just get quotes or estimates versus going through a full-blown procurement, which, as you guys know, is very time and resource intensive. My next update is a staffing update. You guys have met Goryan Gorgievsky. He has worked with our VADI program. He will be moving into full-time regional transportation planning. We're going to do a great deal of work. He's going to be staffing the MPO, which means we will be replacing the VADI admin assistant that is working with Lori on the VADI program. We're in the final stages of recruitment for that. We have some really great candidates. By the next meeting, we should have an announcement of a new staff member. Additionally, the Director of Transportation, which is a large role here, that position still remains vacant. I am beginning to research recruitment firms to see if we need to get some outside help to be able to cast our net wider to get a highly qualified candidate to support all the transportation work that we're doing. I'll come back with you all. However, there won't be a budget requirement because we already have a contingency line item, so I can use that contingency to pay for any kind of recruitment firm that we might want to settle on. And then I'd like to introduce Caden Pritchett. Caden Pritchett comes to us as a full-time VISTA member. So we will have him for the full year, full-time 40-hour week. He'll be working to support Regional Housing Partnership and the Regional Housing Summit that we're planning for spring. So we're very excited to welcome him. VADI, you already got a really great update from Lori. I'm going to move over to transportation updates real quick. Safe Streets and Roads for All. We've talked about that several times in here. Just want to let you guys know we're done with the first round of engagement. This week and next week, we are on site doing site visits of specific locations in the high injury network with consultants, engineers, VDOT, your staff and our staff looking at the sites to try to identify, prioritize them and come up with strategies or solutions that will be incorporated into the plan. We also provided a letter of support for Charlottesville. They're applying for a supplemental planning grant through Safe Streets and Roads for All. So the PDC did support that application because it dovetails into the work that we are doing and it'll help us set our strategies for what Charlottesville wants to do. For mobility management, right now we contract with JABA to have a one-click, one-call center. It's called a mobility specialist position. It was intended to be contracted out in the beginning, eventually hoping to bring it under roof. We are definitely finding that we would be able to be much more effective and much more efficient with resources if they were employed and housed here so that our mobility manager and our mobility specialist can work side by side on all of the work that they're doing rather than going through a chain of people at a different organization, one being managed by JABA, one being managed by us, both of them having different schedules and different, other priorities. And so we are likely going to look at advertising that position and terminating our contract with the partner and just taking that position in-house. JABA will still partner with us for all of the actions that we're going to be doing. They're still going to be referring their people through the same hotline. Nothing will change outwardly facing, but inwardly it'd be a lot easier management wise if we could staff that here. So that's something that wanted to put before you. That is not currently in this draft of the budget. If there is no real pushback against that, it will go into the next version of the budget, right? It's not in there now. Yeah, it'll go into the October one. That's right. So instead of a consultant pass-through, it'll become a personnel salary for the same amount. And then let's see. Couple other Blue Ridge Cigarette Tax Board. I know many of you are already aware, but Rockingham County is now a member of Blue Ridge Cigarette Tax Board effective July 1st. For the month of July, 834,000, just above that, packs of cigarettes were sold in the month of July. That's the highest number in several months. We had been seeing a trend in decline, but that was a very high month, atypical. And then environmental programs. Bella already gave a great update on the watershed improvement, but I wanted to bring to your attention the Rivanna River Basin Commission. They're holding their annual conference scheduled for September 27th. It's at 9:30 at the Carver Recreation Center, and it's going to be focused on progress and goals for connectivity and conservation in the urban Rivanna corridor. That is what they identified as the priority. And then finally, we do some direct local planning support. A new contract that we have is with the town of Mineral. We're just supporting on an administrative end their required lead service line inventory. We're helping them with their procurement. We're helping them with their invoicing, but they're contracting out the work. So we're not in the field doing the work. And then last thing I'll note, which is not in the executive director's report because it just happened today, is that we did have a discussion with the owner of this building. We are we're going into our 5th year of a 5-year lease. So wanted to begin to talk to them now about what their plans were related to our tenancy. I know we have a very large capital reserve account that has been building over time. So I'd like to work with the finance executive committee and or a building committee if it gets to that point to learn the wishes of the commission and whether or not you guys would like to continue to be tenants and renters, or if you want to consider purchase of a building. That is something that has come up many, many years here over time. I think we're well positioned now to do that if that is your wishes. But we are in the very early stages of that. We were informed today that they don't have plans to ask us to leave. So there is the potential to stay here. There's a potential to renovate, continue to be tenants, or to continue to look at other places. So just throwing that out there is something that we are working on.
You had any conversation with them that are open to selling this space?
We did ask that. They will get back to us within 2 weeks with that answer.
I mean, this has been an ongoing debate philosophically. I know we were hitting it really hard in like 18, 19.
Yep.
And then COVID hit, and then that just wasn't even, it's crazy to me that it was year 5. I don't know if you want answers now or just.
I'm happy to get feedback, or we can have this discussion at Finance Executive Committee and come back
Probably
to
better to do it there.
It's more information.
Burden our negotiation.
There you go.
You were gonna mess with my time, so.
I was gonna mess with your time.
Okay,
And then the final thing I just attached to my executive report this time so that you guys just had copies of it, but it is a copy of our award letter for the Body 24 grant that we received, as well as the authorization letter allowing us to begin work in advance of being under contract. We go through a long contract negotiation phase and we want to keep the work moving. So we were authorized to continue to do work and they would reimburse us for that work outside of the contract date. So just included those for your reference.
Questions, any other questions? Thank you very much. Well, moving on to the roundtable discussion. Since you were so talkative, I'm so sorry.
I'll be quick, now, Putnam County, we're currently in a situation where we're just working through our zoning, comp plans done. It's now working through zoning definitions, it's gonna take us a couple of years. In terms of business, I think this is important to talk about, we're seeing a major drop in food and beverage consumption. A lot of restaurants are starting to struggle. As many people know, actually consumption of alcohol in general, not because of me, has gone down dramatically. And we're actually starting to see that result in tax rates or tax revenue. And our local breweries and cideries and wineries are actually saying this is actually a sizable dip. We're talking 20 to 30% drop just in consumption. Now, again, there have been a lot of switches amongst the breweries to providing non-alcoholic beverages, which, they have no problem doing. Problem you run into is you can't really sell non-alcoholic beverages easily because of its ability. It rots quicker because it doesn't have alcohol and all the other aspects of beer, which is why beer exists. It's preserve itself. So we're actually seeing a big dip in that, seeing a major dip in short-term rentals, which is in some respects a good thing. In others, it's indicative of other issues. People's non-interest in utilizing whatever excess cash that they may or may not have. So we're starting to see some of those impacts differently. The housing conversation is pretty much the same. It's a struggle. We got people moving from everywhere and absorbing a lot of our housing stock. And locals we're truly getting to a point where, local household names are becoming a thing of the past. And now it's a new family name that you never recognized. The house that was in a family for 200 years. So we're starting to see that culture shift quite substantial with the dawn of the internet era. Beyond that, going into a new budget year, and we'll be excited. We'll see what we can not afford to do. Great, Mr. Higgins.
Very briefly, Greene County is now in the 15th month of operating its own independent Department of Water and Sewer.
Nice.
At this time last year, we were having significant problems with the accuracy and timeliness of billing. Gratifyingly, it now has been almost entirely resolved, mainly through the expedient of identifying poorly functioning or non-functional water meters and replacing them. Last month, we hired a permanent director for the Department of Water and Sewer, Mr. Hutka. He has expertise in public works planning and implementation. Certainly, those will be valuable skills as the county progresses in its efforts to upgrade and improve our infrastructure.
Why don't you do it better than Orange?
Well, in fairness, they don't know where to contaminate. So Jody's Auto Repairs or.
Mr. Goldie, you want to pipe in there?
Well, yeah, the new director for that is definitely, well, the interim director we had, he made leaping steps alone. And then now we got a full-time director for it, and then the interim, he's gonna be there like a couple days, still helping to implement a lot of that, and we definitely got a lot of growth right now, quite a few, housing things coming up, and the biggest thing in that now is trying to get the water impoundment to start supplying that too, so. We got a long ways to go on that, but it's making leaps and bounds in a lot of ways on it. So hopefully that within the next year, we'll definitely, maybe with all this reservoir projects and something get started with that. Because they get down to the deadline of when a lot of it has to be done, so. They gotta step up the game and get a lot of stuff going and get that ready. We did, we've had a couple different. We did turn down a big major business thing that may or may not have worked for Greene on a farm winery, and there was a lot of big discussion on calling it an event center. And I think that's what put everybody in the county in a big panic to. But we didn't approve the SUP for their big building at this point, so. I mean, I think it may be something with their by right to start, see what it does to the community and the impact, and then maybe within a year after it gets started, then if they come back, we can approve expanding or something like that to. But that's the ins and outs and pros and cons of that kind of stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's where we at to.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll just keep it going, not too back and forth, so we'll do Mr. Pruitt next.
Sure, I forget when you last time meeting, how much ground I gotta cover. Probably the most notable thing, we spent quite a long time on this last night at our board meeting, and frankly, it's also coming back to us after we spent quite a lot of time on it 2 months ago, and that's we have finally approved a new cell tower ordinance in Albemarle County. We've historically had what I would characterize as an extremely restrictive cell tower ordinance. We have 3 different tiers of approval. One, which is basically automatic. Tier 2, which requires administrative approval. Tier 3, which requires full legislative approval. So coming before the planning commission, coming before the board of supervisors, and the concern is that tier 3 makes them non-economical, so that they just don't fit within the period, because why would I? Right, if I have to go through a long process to cite them. Things get kicked out to a tier 3 when they're in, among other things, an avoidance area. Which we had designated as agricultural and forestal districts, historic districts, scenic highways and byways, mountain ridge lines. Which sounds all well and good until you actually draw those on a map and you realize it's 60% of the county. And almost my entire district was in fact a historic district. Because we got Monticello down there and everything else, and they're like, well, let's make the whole thing a historic district. Never build a cell tower. We had previously hit quite a lot of things off that avoidance list when it came to us about a few months ago. So we said that we did not want historic districts, agricultural districts, or scenic highways and byways on there anymore, because that was massive. But we did want to try and capture some of those concerns. Like we don't want to make it open season so that you can build a tower right next to Monticello. So staff kind of put together 2 different options based on that, either using national historic places that have been registered or national historic landmarks that have been registered. There's 4 national historic landmarks in Albemarle County. They're the ones you might expect for the most part. Monticello, 2 others. No, I don't think so, actually. I'm trying to remember one of them is Shack Mountain, which is just a house in Jack Hewitt. And I forget what it was. Maybe it was actually. And then there was something like 64 historic places, which is basically any house that is suitably old owned by someone suitably rich and suitably vague that got them registered. We actually have a split vote on which of those to adopt as kind of the perimeter of avoidance, and we ended up in the interest of not having a final vote. We adopted the more restrictive one, but we froze it in time, so we won't allow a 60-foot historic place, so that it can't be used offensively to keep someone from putting a tower in their neighbor's. We also created a new avoidance area to try and protect ecologically sensitive areas in the county. That specifically is identifying very large interconnected forest blocks, which are almost entirely located in the mountain ridge area. So it's somewhat duplicative, but it is both under and less inclusive in different ways, in a way that's specifically protecting ecological. I'm really excited. It's gonna be a huge difference for the south side of the county, which has hardly any cell service right now. It's really abysmal.
Nice. Every time I drive, work out.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's got a story, and that's how you know it's a problem. Two other things that I will mention just because they're near and dear to my heart. Something that's been interesting seeing kind of how we grapple with as a government. I forget if I mentioned this a while ago, but an issue that really got a bee in my bonnet a while ago. You've seen kind of a general uptick in terror hoaxes, squattings, bomb threats, these kinds of things that disrupt public spaces. Shooting threats at schools, bomb threats at flights in Martha Jeff. We had a guy claim he had a bomb there recently. And then the thing that got me particularly exercised was 2 consecutive bomb threats at the Planet Fitness that I go to in my district. And I'm not. And my reaction when I heard about it was also a very political thing because it was seen as incentivized by the way that property count people and say against the question. So there's that weird national political connection of it. I wanted to go high and right. I told the county, can we sue this TikTok account in Florida? Why not? The answer is it would probably be a losing case. And 2, we think that our legal authority is displaced by this particular enabling authority that was passed in the wake of 9/11 that tried to expand counties' ability to respond to terror hoaxes. It prescribes an incredibly limited limit. Basically, you can charge $200 or up to $2,500 if you itemize every amount of time that went into the emergency response, and it can only be attached to a Commonwealth attorney's successful conviction. So an absolute nothing burger that does nothing for deterrence, and the process of itemizing costs more than you're getting. Still, it's a matter of getting caught trying, and it's like, oh, well, this seems like at the very least enable this or activate this enabling legislation. Even that blew up in our face because we had a back and forth with the Commonwealth attorney about whether or not this was mandatory to use once he received a conviction, which he didn't because he doesn't like mandatory sentences. Point being, it's going to appear in our legislative priority because it's a freaking hot mess. It both ties our hand, gives us a remedy that's worse than what we would have had if they hadn't said anything. An absolute mess of life. And kind of just illustrates how many messes there are in enabling legislation. And I thought that might be a general interest of folks as they kind of suss out what they can and can't do. And sometimes they're the real dog shit job of giving you the power they need. And kind of the last thing I've been particularly exercised about, there was a there's a story that was covered in a good bit by Charlottesville tomorrow, both in an interest area that I'm focused on and in my district. There's a historically a student housing, but now just a very low end housing complex in the urban ring of my district called Cavalier Crossing that has been sold earlier this year to a very specialized boutique with out of normal that basically bundles a lot of different investors, creates experience communities, focuses them specifically in growing areas and specific developments that are so they are buying up low income communities. They are phasing evictions over the course of about a year, and then they're going to slap code and quintuple the rents, probably out of foolishness, like some classy amenities. And there's very little we can do about it. And I'm particularly exercised about it and trying to maybe elevate this issue. Because one, it's my constituents in a really direct way, but also because it seems to portend a general trend that I'm concerned about. We also have just seen another major development get sold, so this is going to have to hit up on 29. And I think the broader context that Michael was actually very helpful, very helpful in pointing out is that almost all of the county's LIHTC inventory is set to expire. The LIHTC inventory, the low income housing tax credit subsidized inventory, is normally subsidized for a 30-year period. Now it is more often 99 because of just how the tax credit works, but ones that were built in the 90s and 80s are mostly about 30 years. They're all set to expire. When they expire, the people, or they have, which means these are for-profit developers who are sitting on a depressed income property, who are like, well, I would now like to capitalize my investment I made 30 years ago. I'm going to sell it for more than I'm making for it currently, and someone else is going to develop it. That's realistically like a domino effect we're going to see, and we can't do anything about it other than try and buy it out from under them. We can't. Or there's an right.
Well, and if you buy it out from under them, that's just setting yourself up to be the, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, let's just go to the bank of Albemarle and get our huge pile of cash for not selling it.
The two possible solutions that I was able, one of them I came to the table with, and one of them I brought to the table. So the possibility of a land bank would be a way to kind of intervene on that. Expensive, still expensive. And the other thing I would be very excited about, because I'm an obnoxious lefty, would be a rent stabilization enabling authority that would allow us to either exercise that between redevelopments, say you cannot increase rent more than 100% through redevelopment, or just normal rent renewals, which we see much more frequently, which would be a small single-digit percent plus consumer price index between lease renewals. But we don't have that, and we probably won't have that in Virginia. And that's the end of my rant. Thank you.
That's a good rant. Well, we'll let the gentleman from Charlottesville pick up where he's left off there.
All right,
You guys can fight over it, okay?
well, okay, so, segue to the land bank, it's making progress. We are writing it so you guys can hop aboard. So you don't have to do it twice. That is, I wouldn't say, is it rounding the final term? Yeah. 25%. Yeah. But we've got what we've got, and I think we are now trying to get a legal review done on all of the works and tweaks we stuck into the ordinance. I'm sorry?
The twerks.
We twerked on it. Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah, actually, this is not gonna be your father's land bank. So that is making its progress and should be in front of city council in the next couple of months. For at least a work session to bring it all up to speed and get some feedback and hopefully get that executed. So, you know, we might be on the way, which segues me into the Carlton Mobile Home Park Hail Mary play, whereas you know, there's a statute. If you have a mobile home park of X size and you sell it, you can
You have to allow the residents to be able.
Yep.
you have to allow the residents to be able to purchase it, but it is a bear trap. Essentially, the rule, and I'm flying over this at 70,000 feet. Hey, here's a letter, we're selling it. Here's the top line price. We're not going to tell you who the buyer is. We're not going to tell you any of the terms, but you now have 59, 58, 57 offer. So you don't even know what the offer really is, except the top line. Primarily, I think because the sellers were not terribly interested in becoming old man Potter in the eyes of the entire city. And I don't think they wanted to necessarily shaft anybody. They were receptive to a consortium, including the city, PHA, Habitat, and chewing gum and baling wire. And we cobbled together an offer that was accepted. But that has led to a recommendation by the planning commission, and then a rate which was going to go with council subcommittee on legislation about, we need to update this statute to one, if you redact the players if you want to, but you need to know the terms of the deal, so that you know what you can respond to. Number two, 60 days is ridiculous. For a multi-million-dollar grant. It's ridiculous for a bunch of bankers to work out a multi-million-dollar transaction in 60 days, let alone a bunch of local home park residents trying to work out a multi-million-dollar deal. Because that is a Venn diagram that does not have much overlap.
Yes.
And that the provisions for the value of trailers and the cost of moving them be one bumped up to something that is within the realm of realism and chained to some sort of index. And such, so that's in our legislative packet. I won't steal Michael's thunder on ranked choice voting and what else should I?
Stephen, whatever you want.
Good.
Can I take something you said and turn a question to David real quick? Has there ever been a legislative proposal, balloon, failed effort that sought to import the tenant's right to buy, I'm forgetting the acronym we use for this, the tenant's right of first refusal on mobile home parks? Has there been anything that would be resembling that, for example, for localities, for properties that have received federal or local subsidies? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there
You
was,
see how I'm threading this together?
Yeah.
there was a right of first refusal bill this past year. I'm not sure how far it stretched. But that did not pass, but I'll look that up and make sure you're all aware of that.
The original legislation for the mobile home parks was a right of first refusal. It was taken out, so nobody's required to accept the offer. They just have to consider it, which is like a very low bar.
Particularly since you don't know, you can't make a good faith, you can make your good faith offer, it's not an informed offer.
But probably the most impactful thing would be returning a right of first refusal for an equal or greater counteroffer, which was in it originally. And yeah, I mean, I don't recall any legislation about right of first refusals more broadly. I know a lot of the new high-tech projects still work in a right of first refusal along with the city funding. I don't know if you could really do it retroactively for these old deals, but.
I'm just remembering, I know that Arlington County had tried to figure out a way to enforce some kind of notification period when affordable complexes were going to be sold or redeveloped, so that they would frankly have just a longer lead time to develop some kind of community response, because it feels like we keep getting caught with our pants down.
Yeah, and it's particularly gets ginned up because frankly, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 60 days is not an unreasonable length of time to find a new place to live. Now, 6 months is a push.
Yeah.
Just in terms of how tight the rental market is.
And Charlottesville, likewise, we have some low-income housing tax credit projects that will be expiring soon that were done before we projects done in the 70s or 80s where they would include right of first refusal and 99 ground leases. At least we've seen the most practical thing to plan for actually helping those residents will probably be Virginia Housing has financing options to purchase buildings with expiring LIHTC periods. And if you can build up a reserve amount of money for a land strike fund and then partner with nonprofits, there are a lot of state financing options to do it, especially if you've got like a couple years to plan for it. I know on rent stabilization, I think Darius Clark had a bill that was piloted in one locality that he's introduced twice, never made it out of committee. And that's probably the closest effort there is for any kind of rent stabilization so far. All that, I will just add quickly, I think we received our vacancy report, which is interesting, given a lot of the narratives that are out in the community or maybe in the press that the vacancy rate on the downtown mall is the lowest vacancy rate of any of our business districts. It's about 3%. And then if you factor in businesses that are about to open, it's 1 to 2%. And our commercial district with the highest vacancy rate is Barrett's Road. So homeless or not, apparently actually destroying the downtown wall in terms of vacancy rates or the success of businesses. Then there's ranked choice voting, which was passed, which will be implemented in a local 2025 election, which will obviously be electoral change, and we'll have to kick off a big voter education campaign just to make sure everyone's aware of how ranked choice voting works. Not confused when they enter the ballot. But I'm optimistic it'll be positive. So we'll see how that goes. We're doing an audit of all our ARPA spending money, including evaluating things we allocated in the past, but to fully spend. That deadline for localities to decide how they're gonna use all those funds is coming up in the end of December. And if localities haven't made decisions how to use it all, it'll go right back to federal government. So obviously we don't want that. And then the last thing that was mentioned, probably the biggest news, was the Carlton mobile home park purchase. Which was very exciting. About 66 families who live there, 250 people who were probably about to become homeless or out there, their lives upended, but through a huge partnership with nonprofits, city, the residents themselves, everybody, it was able to actually happen. So for at least the next 3 years, it will remain just as is a mobile home park, but long-term Habitat's plan is to work with the residents, similar to Southwood, to redevelop it while ensuring that there's no displacement and anyone who wants to stay is able to. But it'll probably be 5 years before, ground break on the project like that. But yeah, it was really, there's the new state law, there's pretty new state legislation of revolving loan funds, as well as grants for mobile home park preservation. So it seems like a lot of those agencies are excited. This could be kind of a case study for anywhere else that has mobile home parks that would face displacement. And I know there are many in our region.
No, that's very impressive what Charlottesville did and what they did.
But it does speak to the tools that are needed, because this, as I said, it was held together with chewing bailing wire, and it did gastrointestinal and cardiovascular damage, all sorts of senior managers everywhere.
I would say, to any of y'all that have mobile home parks in your communities, and I think all of you do, really be on the lookout, because national private equity groups are being really aggressive in buying these mobile home parks and evicting the residents. And there are ways with your zoning that you could try to preemptively make that less feasible, as well as looking at these state programs. But particularly people who live in mobile home parks, once those private equity firms come in, it's going to be destroyed by a period of less than a year. And those people will probably move out of state. I think there's only 2 vacancies in central Virginia that even allow mobile homes to be moved to that lot. So the residents there, before they knew they would be able to stay, were looking, the closest they were looking at was like Wise County area, and then others were just looking completely out of state. So
As I invoke my authority, I'm the chairman of the Virginia Manufactured Modular Housing Association. So we often have this discussion about what that displacement is. And of course, our interest in preserving mobile home communities is, and we call manufactured housing communities just for that. Mobile homes are homes built pre-1976. So toss that out. But if you guys do have interest in talking about collectively how this works with your zoning, how it should look, please outreach to me in my other capacity. And I'd be more than happy to help you with my team that we have and work on this everywhere. For example, Hopewell, we're interacting with them on trying to get manufactured housing in their zone. Because this plays both ways, like through the preservation of the mobile home community. However, you'd be amazed at how many localities ban manufactured housing in the rest of their zone. So being empathetic to one, but then rejecting it in every other context, isn't saving anyone, because at the end of the day, manufactured housing has been a point for low-income individuals for the last 50 years. So,
Yeah, it is a cost there.
Well, I know, right?
Yeah, that we as supervisors focus on rural preservation and ensuring that we deny housing. Don't concentrate on, focus. Vertical growth. And then we pass that burden on to
the next county.
and you don't pass that burden on, the costs go up. And you create situations like this where of course it's attractive to buy the mobile home because you can't get anything else approved, so you just buy something that's already has multi zoning in it. So that makes it attractive.
Well, you know, and
Charge $2,500, $3,000 for rent these days.
let me know how I can help on that.
Well, thank you, Charlottesville, for your excellent presentation. And with no further ado, the gentleman from Louisa. I think we should let Mr. Woodward speak first, just because, you know, his sunglasses are really bright.
I apologize for that too, but it's the only way I can deal with the screen tonight, so I appreciate
Oh, I
you.
was looking at Hunter S. Thompson on.
You're right. It's a nice look.
I just have one thing real quickly, and then I will defer to Supervisor Barlow. I really appreciate Christine and David taking the time to come to our meeting Tuesday night. And it was a really busy night for us, and I know their schedule is really busy, so we really appreciate that and everything they do for us. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so now Louisa, well, yes, I'm not, but go ahead.
Oh, and, I also think David and Christine, they heard a right energized meeting. We've been dealing with love since last February, finally put it to rest last night.
They won't love no better.
Nelson, we got a couple of positive things going. Business part, it's moving forward. The water tank is going up. Very shiny water tank is, provide water flow and, so maybe the cracks will be that. Two of the Amazon data centers that are breaking ground. Two ends of, two different sides of the county. The James River water tank, the last leg broke ground August the 14th. So if we can ever put that back to rest, that would be a blessing. That pretty much it for me. We try to behave.
And how much tax revenue you did send?
It's been equated to be the equivalent of Motown each month. We hope.
Yeah, but you know what, Louisa will just keep their tax rate the same. Oh, they're very smart. Very kudos to you, to your board, your long-term vision, so. Fluvanna County, we continue to work on building our wall. Just kidding. We were speaking quite a bit about signs. I think we were entertaining David there. It's kind of sad that we stopped speaking about it. We had to have him speak next. And thank you for coming out. We missed you, Ms. Jacobs.
I was online. I was listening in.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
We've already talked about your
Between,
signs.
between soccer
today.
drop-offs, I was listening to the meeting.
But the further conversation. The signage was, you know, whether or not we sign it with VDOT to send notices to people that we're gonna charge them $100 for each file. The values of that, conversation that we had before. And we've had that conversation previously, so that was very exciting. Then we talked a little bit more about the upcoming solar ordinance. It is moving to the planning commission for public hearing next week. The solar commission worked diligently to provide a framework for the planning commission to then provide something to board supervisors. As it stands right now, it's still very restricted, quite restricted. Setbacks are pretty high. I think that's probably one of the biggest items of concern that's out there. The rest I would say is tough but fair and protects the land. So that we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be interesting to see if we modify the setbacks so that we are attractive enough and are not denying by ordinance. Given the possibility. Groundbreaking, I missed it. Mr. Barlow and I have been serving together for 11 years at least, if not more. I used her more than I have, but JRWA is something that's been a long, long road. So I was sorry not to be there, but happy to hear it. I'm pretty proud.
Huge celebration.
We try to stay up. That's right. Hopefully that will be in 2026. I think. So it's, and I'm sure that the Louisa County is finally happy to see the potential of their pipes being filled with water. They've had it out for, what, now 6, 7 years. They have some.
Keep pumping.
Or you're pumping it up the other way. That's pretty much it from Fluvanna County at this point in time. Speaking of housing, I should say that right there at the intersection of 53 and Lake Montello Road, there is a subdevelopment that one of the subdevelopments include about 270 homes, I believe, altogether, of which 175 are apartments that are affordable housing. That's 60% AMI. And those are finally getting ready to September. So that'll be a nice relief for the community, I think. Probably got about 70 applicants so far. And to the point that they 6 months, or you said 6 months, somebody said 6 months for finding housing these days.
It's not even that. People are losing their vouchers, their Section 8 vouchers, because they're not years.
Right. But everything just keep going, just farther and farther afield from this. I mean, frankly, if you go from Charlotte, downtown Charlottesville, like leads to the ring, to Albemarle, I mean, you're not gonna find more housing.
No, it's more scarce.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. So, yeah. Constantly have people asking, hey, you know, you money, some, et cetera. So the housing market is extremely tight. Nobody's selling their home, you know, people low insurance and they're being bought by,
Localities do a great job of creating scarcity.
Absolutely. So. All right, next we have, our next meeting is going to be October 3rd. The finance committee time and date is to be determined still.
It's confirmed. It was to be determined at the point of this coming out to you, but has since been September 17th.
September 17th for the be there. And I will entertain a motion to do. Let's go. Second. All in favor? Aye. All right, you're on there, then. Second by Mr. Rutherford.
Yeah.
Can you just adjourn it?
I actually think I'm sharing